This episode of the podcast is being sponsored by Irish Dance Theatre, who are presenting their annual winter production, The Celtic Gift, at various venues in Colorado. For more information, please visit www.irishdancetheatre.com. My name is Martin Percival, and you are listening to the Irish Dance Podcast. Folk dance to phenomenon and beyond. Hi everyone, I'd like to introduce today's guest. She's an Irish dancer, teacher, adjudicator. She's a professor, an author, and she's currently the public relations officer for CLRG. Please welcome Orfhlaith Ní Bhriain. Hi Orla.
Hi Martin, great to talk to you.
Sorry for that long rambly introduction. Did I miss anything?
But spare time is clearly not high on my priority list when I listen to the long list of jobs that I supposedly have.
No, well, the most exciting one for me is the author stuff, and we'll get to that in due course. But I'd love if we can just start with how you. I think I've got a fairly good idea of how you got involved in Irish dance, but if you would like to tell our listeners.
Well, I come from a family, as you know, of Irish dancers and teachers, and we have an interesting origin, because my granny was Una Ní Bhriain, and she was one of 5 sisters. And a neighbour apparently cursed her father for not having any male heir and said the O'Rourke name would die out. Whereupon he sent his 5 daughters to Irish dancing, and in 1929 they founded the O'Rourke School.
Wow.
So now we're currently in the 3rd generation of the O'Rourke School. So despite the lack of male lineage, the name has continued to grow. So my granny and her 2 sisters founded it, Mary and Margaret, and then my mom Maureen took it over with her sister Anya, and then Anya died quite young. So then myself and my cousin Declan took our teachers, and so we became sort of the 3rd generation, if you like, and that was like 30 years ago when Anya passed away. So it wasn't something that I planned on doing. It's a bit like a family pub or a farm that I inherited.
Yeah, you just got roped into it, yeah.
You kind of get dragged in by kind of cultural osmosis.
Yeah, but I mean, wow, what a history. That's just amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So you took your teachers, but how was competition life for you?
To be honest with you, my mother wasn't a big fan of the competition scene, even though she was very, very ambitious, but she sent us all to music. So she tried her very best to keep us out of the dancing, but we all really enjoyed it. So I did solos, but I wasn't particularly talented, to be honest with you. I loved doing the dance dramas and the choreographies. I mean, I did dance at the All-Irelands and Worlds and stuff, but, I wasn't motivated enough really to be a serious dancer. Truthfully, I would say that all of my 3 sisters were more keen on the actual dancing, but I always loved to teach. I would teach anything. I loved teaching, running, swimming, cooking, all of the things that I wasn't particularly good at, but I did really like teaching them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I consider myself a facilitator of other people's talents, because my own talents lay in a completely different route. I like to play music and I like to sing, but I liked to teach other people, and I did enjoy teaching dancing, if that makes sense. So we myself and Declan sort of got dragged into it, and then my other sisters joined like at a later stage, and we have a very big and successful competitive school, which is also ironic, because I suppose my granny had won the Munster belt, and Anna would have won the All-Ireland and the Munster belt, and we've had multiple world champions, so we would be ambitious in what we do. But as a person, I think competition is good for standards, but I like a really holistic approach to everything that I do. So I would be more that type of a, goal and project oriented person.
Yeah, the ultimate teacher, right? I think that's, yeah. So that's
my original training then was as a primary school teacher. So when I finished college, I loved to teach. I taught primary school for years. And that worked out really well with dancing, because I was able to, teach dancing in the evenings and play feshes at the weekends. And so I sort of fell into the whole lot of it. And even doing my adjudicators wasn't something I particularly wanted to do, because I was having all the fun without any of the responsibility, because I was playing. So I was having a great time traveling the world. But being a musician, you're really popular. And being an adjudicator, you're popular only with the winner.
Brilliant.
That's what somebody who's experienced both, I can really testify to that.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, it sounds like you had a wonderful time growing up with all of the aspects of what you were doing. So how did you get involved in, you said you were doing primary school teaching, but how did you get involved in your University of Limerick stuff?
What actually happened was that we were very involved in Irish dance, sort of from a cultural aspect. So it was like dance, music, language, the GAA, hurling. So that was kind of that Ireland that we lived in. And I was teaching primary school for about 10 years. And then I thought, you know what? The Irish World Academy of Music and Dance had just moved to Limerick. Professor Micheál O'Sullivan had set up. And there were no students there, but he had employed 2 staff members, an ethnomusicologist and an ethnochoreologist. So I popped down to visit Dr. Catherine Foley and decided I was going to take a career break and do a master's in ethnochoreology. To be honest with you, I had no idea what that was, but I knew that I could take a career break without just busking. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want to take a career break and just drift. I wanted to take a career break that was committed to doing something. So I went to the University of Limerick to study ethnochoreology. We were always laughing. I said I always wanted an ology, but it was studying dance and culture. And I would say that was a changing point for me, because that changed the way that I did everything. I got to study Irish dance as a community and not just our Limerick community. My master's was on the Irish dance community of the diaspora in Birmingham. I was really fascinated with that. The teachers there were fabulous. They all welcomed me. So I learned about it in a completely different way. And then I returned, found completion of my master's, I returned to school. And I didn't stay because I wasn't the same person as I had been when I had left. And I started a PhD in competition culture and creativity. So I looked at the FESH as a potential site for creativity, and I had such fun.
Oh, God, I can well imagine. Listen, let's talk about the course that you did, the ethnochoreology. That sounds... I've had a chat with Brendan de Galli and about his time, but just studying Irish dance, I think we should all have to do it. Studying Irish dance is amazing.
You end up studying dance as part of culture, not just as part of Ireland. So we were forced, I suppose, to look at the world and to look at how people in other cultures use dance. And then you can kind of compare and contrast your own culture to that, because we had lived, well, I had certainly, and I have discussed this with Brendan, lived in a sort of a microcosm bubble, we probably thought until we grew up that everybody, did the same kinds of activities, when you go into a FESH. But if you don't know that community, it's very strange to you. Suddenly I was thinking about how other people might view the FESH, and that really interested me. So how would you describe a FESH to somebody from Mars? Or how would you describe a FESH to somebody who had never seen Irish dancing, or didn't know what Irishness was, or where Ireland even was?
Right.
So that was really interesting, because we also learned how to notate dance, and that changed the way I would say that I taught dancing. So we had to, precisely say where your toe was in relation to your heel, and how pointed it was, how extended it was. And I just hadn't realized that you could be so scientific about dance. I really didn't. And so after that, my head was like full. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I was teaching my class, and my poor students, at this point, for
guinea pigs,
their brand, so it was like, yes, we'll try this, because in the Irish World Academy, you could have anything. We could have a Balinese dancer one week, and then the next week we might have an African dancer and a percussionist, and then the next week we might have had Jimmy Smith doing North Kerry. And then we could have been doing Shannon. So suddenly I was opened up to a whole host of things. I remember Peggy McTaggart coming up to teach us our repertoire from Cork, and I was just thinking, it is such a pity that we can't do this in the Irish dance world, because we're so pitted against each other competitively.
Yes.
That there is, and at the university I experienced that sort of generous exchange that as teachers we naturally have, but as dancing teachers we're sort of curtailed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a huge amount of sense.
That ability, to share stuff that was not competition focused, but at the same time, it was a standard, a really high standard was required. So I was able to kind of concentrate my energies in a completely different way. And I would say that changed me as a teacher. I mean, I was always committed to my students, but this time I had other options, I had more things to give them. I got a residency teaching in Williams College in Western Massachusetts. I spent 2 semesters there teaching Irish dance to their contemporary company. And that was another life-changing moment, like being in Robert Frost country, in the snow. Yeah. Because again, it just didn't happen where I was from. I was from Limerick City, I had gone to school here, I had gone to college here, and suddenly I'm living on Route 2.
Yeah, yeah.
So it definitely, broadened my horizon. So after doing the master's, I kind of was destined to do the doctorate. And then I started all the competition culture, and people were very generous, I have to say, with my research. Like all of the musicians, teachers, dancers that I interviewed, they were fabulous. And I enjoyed doing that. And then I thought, I'd like to do more of this and be more active in the actual academic study of dance.
Oh my God, my head is exploding. It's all just amazing what you've done. When you were out in Massachusetts, then, how was it teaching a contemporary Irish dance to contemporary dancers? Well, it was
really funny because they were really committed performers, and they used to, I attended the American colleges dance festivals and everything with them. That was at that stage, that was when that would have been in the 90s, and in the early 2000s. So at that stage, our notion of sort of performativity and warming up and guarding our culture was
right.
It was you tie your hair in a ponytail, that's you warmed up. And suddenly I found myself taking yoga and Pilates every other day and going to tap classes and going to ballet classes. And and then because I had to explain Irish dance to them out of the context of Ireland, that was completely new to me, because they had A, no context for Ireland, and B, no context for Irish dance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this was something that was imposed upon them. So we actually did a folk ballet, was what we called it in the end, on the life of Grace O Malley. So we looked at women in Ireland through a contemporary Irish dance ballet. And that changed, again, the way I had to break it down, because they didn't like a batter, a treble.
Yeah.
None of that meant anything. And I was like, even the basic posture was foreign to people. It was really fun. Yeah, it was really fun.
No, it sounds amazing. I just having the opportunity to just work with other dancers and just all of the collaboration that you've done just must be, you're blessed, I would say.
You are, except that the problem is then, because you can see the possibility, I remember we had the Williamstown Jazz Festival, and it was they're all improvising, and they were like, we'll just do 4/8 each. And I was like, I couldn't help it, because we have hooks, our 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I was like, actually, I'm thinking of steps. And I remember my sister had come to visit me in America, and she was like, oh no, and she was actually trying to improvise, where I know myself, I was clicking in, bits of motifs that I knew. And that was the first time, I suppose, that I realized, that we had a whole vocabulary that we sort of took for granted.
Yeah.
That we linked into. And it's exciting for me in Limerick, because when you look at, say, the way the likes of Brendan works and the way Colin works, they work, okay, it's out of our vocabulary, but they push it in a very different direction. And that's what we encourage our students to do. So I say to them, yes, you can win the world, but I can teach you to do that in the class. But if you want to go to the university, then that's different. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They can win the world, but they can also win the world if they just train. So if they want to study dance in college, they got to be prepared to be a little bit uncomfortable,
Yeah.
Go further than their body is able,
Yeah. No, it's amazing. So you did the PhD. So what were your, is the work published?
Yeah, so the PhD is actually online in the University of Limerick repository. It's competition culture, documenting the creative processes in Irish dance competitions. So it was actually a study of the World Championships in 2006. The under 19 girls and boys, just those 2 age groups, because they couldn't be under 18 because they would have been children, and that would involve another layer of bureaucracy. Well, no, but because I wanted to interview the students, basically the dancers and their teachers and the musicians and the adjudicators. And I got feedback from all of those people. So people were fantastically generous. So yeah, I'll send you a link for it. You can read it. It's online on the UL Library.
Yeah.
So, and you'll know a lot of the people in it, which is also interesting.
Yeah.
And didn't publish that in a book at the time because Frank Hall was an American anthropologist, he had completed his thesis on Irish dancing, and he published a book with Macketer Press called Competitive Irish Step Dance. So it kind of wasn't the time to publish that book, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I was commissioned by Macketer Press to write a terminology of Irish dance, and I found that interesting because, like, we don't, as you know, have a kind of a common language.
Right.
So that was an interesting project. Sort of, like, there's a terminology of ballet, there's a terminology of tap, and I was like, there isn't really a codified language around Irish dance, but sure, we had to go anyway. And that was interesting for me because I found I had 5 or 6 different ways of describing something. But even that, other people would still call it something different.
Yeah. I find that could be a whole another podcast just about the codification and all of that. It's a huge thing because my partner is a former ballet dancer and he just doesn't understand our world at all.
I can imagine. Like, when you land and you don't bend your leg. I mean, are you trying to kill yourself? You put the full impact of your body weight on the top of your toe without doing a plie. Like. Yeah.
Craziness, yeah. Absolutely. So what were your big takeaways from the PhD then? Your conclusions?
Well, I feel what was interesting for me is I feel really passionate about Irish dance, and I think sometimes people, how will I put this, they don't respect the artistry and the technical genius that our top performers have.
Right.
And I think it can get really, really trivialized as, that competitive thing with the wigs and the bling. And I think the wigs don't dance and the dresses don't dance. It's the dancer dances. And I think that's really important. So I wanted to highlight the actual motifs that the dancers did. So I counted the motifs, I notated them, I did the floor plans, I notated 3 different versions of a drunken gauger. And trust me, they were not the same. So I wanted to highlight the differences, even though to the person from outside of the tradition, it might seem like all the same, to actually look at how the actual top performers were very, very creative, either in how they did it or what they did. So, and it was interesting for me because I didn't know who the winners were going to be, obviously. But as you know, the change in Irish dancing is largely determined by the successful dancers. And if somebody does a triple spin this year and they win, then next year someone will try a quadruple.
Right.
But it was interesting because I've had some really interesting conversations with people because they would say things like, for me, tradition is very important. And I'd say, and what do you consider to be like traditional elements? And then everybody would say, oh, rocks and cross keys. And then you look at the steps and there won't be any rocks or cross keys in the steps. So what we think and what we actually do, and I found that very interesting, that consciousness of it. So what I also found was that the musicians really enjoyed playing for the dancers that they felt a connection with. That they, so even though they were playing at a 76 or they were playing 110, they could sense when somebody was like right on the music or in the music. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And that's a really good perspective. Yeah.
So there was a clear idea. They're also from the adjudicators. Like, it is clear people do know their aesthetics. They know what they want. And I found that interesting, even if it wasn't exactly the same thing. So like I came up with certain things like, posture, timing, rhythm, interpretation, tradition, and I got people to put them in different order. And the old basics, people want your feet turned out and they want you to be in time.
Of course.
And that might seem like, well, that's not rocket science. But when you actually can prove it in writing, it's very interesting to see.
Yeah. It's fascinating, and it's fascinating to know that, like, just as we, pass more and more adjudicators and more teachers and this coming into the world, like, we are really all looking for the same thing, right?
Yeah. Which is interesting because it's never been defined, really.
No, it hasn't. Like, yeah,
it's something we have an idea of, of who our perfect dancer is, and I think that's or what the qualities are in somebody who's dance performance that we would enjoy. So I really enjoyed that because, like, I got to do floor plans for the top 5. I did the top 5 in the girls under 19 and the gents under 19, and then I was able to overlay the floor plans one on top of the other, so you could see like who travelled the most, you could see who did the most trebles, you could see who did the most, like, it was who did more motifs motifs, who only did 6 and who did 19 within the same bars of music. So it was very interesting for me just to look on that as a teacher. And then when I go back to choreographed material, I go, gosh, I'm not going to do too many repetitions, because people can count the number of times they do treble and click.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, and it's I suppose I've left that behind me now, because I've moved on to other research interests. But it was I was very passionate about it for a long time, and I suppose I do incorporate it into my practice.
It just the whole thing is just fascinating to me, and I just love it. The more research we can do about our art form, right, the better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, more.
And you can bring it to other people then, and bring it to other places. Like last year, for example, this year I was in the European Parliament in Brussels on an advocacy committee for dance and health. Now, did I ever think my 1, 2, 3 was going to take me there? No. Right. But I've been involved with groups. One of my PhD students did a project on set dancing for Parkinson's, and then I'm collaborating with a physiotherapist, and we're looking at benefits of dance for older people. So suddenly I found myself at all these courses and really interesting discussions where people are talking about like how dance can, enhance your quality of life. And maybe it's because I'm getting older myself too. We kind of have to reinvent ourselves nearly every decade, to be current in some state. I mean, I'm not going to dance Planxty Davis at 76, but at the same time, I can reuse Planxty Davis in a completely different way for some sort of an improv class that I might do with a group of adults. So that's been interesting. I've been working with a group of adults aged 65 to 80. And honestly,
fantastic.
I think I learned more from them than they will ever learn from me. It was amazing.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, it's really funny. I mean, you kind of wish you could have the same cycle, but I suppose it doesn't come. That kind of wisdom doesn't come before its time.
No, definitely not. What a hugely different dynamic for a class, though. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. And again, it's different because I was actually quite nervous, because I've taught school children obviously for a long time, and I've taught, teenagers and pre-professional and professional dancers, say, my whole life. So you can do that without much thought. But I found I had to really think about this, because I was like, it's a different scenario. They want something. They want to enjoy it. They want to be good at it, but they also want to enjoy it. And I have to make sure I don't ruin that. I did feel responsibility to actually almost provide the not entertainment, that they would feel the joy of dancing. That's what it is.
Yeah. Wow, that's yeah. Oh, I love all of that. I mean, coming from a teacher's perspective, I didn't do an awful lot of prep, for my classes or anything when I was a teacher, but I think some of that's missing. I talk with some people about maybe having like a curriculum, and that we all need to stick to, or whatever it is, just so that we know that we've got some stuff coming out that's that we all understand, but just the experiences hearing from people when they're teaching other groups of people. I loved teaching the adults in my class. I loved it because they didn't, for the most part, they didn't take themselves too seriously, and that they were the ones that I enjoyed teaching. Because, like you said, it's about the love of it, and then just learning something new, stepping outside of their comfort zone. I was clearly comfortable because I knew what I was doing, but you put me in a tap class or a ballet class, and I'm a fish out of water.
But it's also good, like I have done that. It's really good to put yourself in that class, because I remember being in the tap class and thinking, gosh, I'll be able to do this now, because I understand rhythm. Oh my God. I mean, my knees just didn't want to bend for starters.
Right.
So my movement was like, it just really wasn't pretty. It just wasn't. I could make all the sounds, but the shape, the effort flow just wasn't there. And I thought, it must be interesting, because here I am, like, thinking I'm going to be able to do it, and it gives you certainly an understanding of how a student might find it difficult, and you have to look for different ways of explaining things. I think, and that's one of the things that I think is very important for Irish dance teachers, and I wish we could do more of it, like a continuous professional development, because like you do your teachers and you're 20, and you're a different person at 30, and a different person again at 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 and 80 if you're lucky. And we could have a sort of a mentoring system. It's just, I do find that people do end up working a lot in isolation because of the way our competitions are structured.
Yeah,
and I think that's painful because we lose that shared wisdom.
Yeah.
Like you're doing in this is allowing people to share through a forum at least, which is great.
Yeah, it's starting a dialogue, and so, if something can come of it, it'd be great. I completely agree with you. Like, I've learned so much from being around other dancers. And so, being around other teachers would be great. And
that's it. The thing was at the university, like even popping in and out to other people's classes, and we would do things like peer reviews of each other's teaching and get feedback. I mean, it's, there is a curriculum and there is that process to continually develop. So, like, I suppose because I trained as a teacher too, I'd always do that. I'd make my plan for the class, and I might change it, but it's just you have those habits and you have that facility to get that little bit of backup from somebody to say, you're maybe going too quickly, or you might think about doing that a little bit slower.
Right.
You can get that kind of feedback, and you're not left in isolation, because a lot of teachers, I think, can be left in isolation, which is why you now have so many big schools, because people don't want to be on their own.
Yes, no, I completely agree with you. And it gets to a point then where if you have been in isolation and you've kind of figured it out for yourself, then when anybody else is coming up, you're like, well, you have to pay your dues as well. It's like, I had to do it, so you have to do it. So, there's not a spirit of collaboration, especially because of the competitive aspect.
Because of the rules, even that, and that's one of the things I really enjoy the most about the work that I can do in the university, is that you can do that.
Yes.
And that it's possible to do that. And that, I suppose, is one of the reasons why I like doing the commission work, because even if it's only on a talk level, I do get to engage with other people as the PRO, even though my communications might not always be popular, but at the same time, you do get to explain to people, this is why this has happened, and it was meant to be on here, but now it's on there. We've moved it to the other hall because, And that is good, because I'm not shy of that. Obviously, I've been talking for a living for a long time, so I'm not shy of speaking to people. But I'm conscious that no matter how you package it, if you're delivering news other than the news that people want,
it's not going to get.
Sometimes it's not quite shoot the messenger, but it is like, you do feel like, oh my God, when people get a message from me going, dear all, or Achor Darinka, they're thinking,
oh, here we go. Yeah. Oh yeah, so that's funny. So okay, let's talk about the commission, your role in the commission at the moment. How did that come about, and what is your remit?
There were some days when I asked myself that question, but the system is here, you get elected through your region. So myself and Charles are the regional reps for Munster. So we got elected for Munster, and I naively, to be honest with you, went along to my first commission meeting, and I was like, oh my God, there's like 100 people here. I was like, because I had thought committees were like 10 people,
yes.
And suddenly there was like 100 people. And then, so in the first year, that was fine. I went on the overseas committee, which was really interesting to see all of the other countries where they're starting to teach dance. And I was really interested in that, to be honest with you. But then suddenly I found myself getting put forward as the PRO, because I wouldn't be shy of expressing my opinion at the meeting if it needed to represent our region. Does that make sense? So if something needed to be said, I mean, that's what we're there for, is to represent dancing generally, but our teachers specifically at that time. And now I find you have to juggle the two, because sometimes in my role as the PRO, because I was elected to that office, sometimes my role as the PRO, it mightn't be actually very popular in our region. Does that make sense? So you find you're wearing two hats, but they're not sitting quite comfortably. So you kind of, you have to say, so, well, in my capacity as the PRO, this is my duty to tell everybody this. But as a Munster teacher, I just want to make my personal views clear on that matter, if that makes sense. So you kind of have to hold that line just for your own personal integrity, to be honest with you. But a lot of people, what they don't see, and I didn't really realize this, like the amount of hours that people put in voluntarily.
Yes,
it's incredible. And again, it's like that. People only see like the tiaras and the trophies, and they don't realize that somebody has been polishing them for hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's. I mean, yourself. You've been at that meeting. I find it frustrating because I'm not. How will I put this? I wouldn't be a patient person by nature. So, and that some of those changes move really slowly. And I don't mean change for the sake of change, but it takes you time, I suppose, to understand how the system works. And how you can bring in changes, and what's maybe the best way to suggest a change. Because I think sometimes, people can get carried away with the change without thinking down the road of the next 5 knock-on effects that will have.
Yes.
The domino effect of you remove one rule and then 4 more Jenga pieces fall out of the puzzle. And I do find that frustrating, I have to say, because somebody, you're saying, but you can't do that, because if you take away Wednesday, what's going to happen on Tuesday and Thursday? You've taken away the rest day in between. And I do find that difficult. But it's difficult because, again, on the commission, you've people who have always done it in a really voluntary capacity, and then you've people who are running a big business. And it's not the same experience of dance.
No.
So some of those opinions will never be compatible, ever.
No, absolutely not. I will say that my frustration with the whole system is just that it, like you said, it goes a little slowly. It's a bureaucracy, so the red tape of it all is very slow. So if you do have some change, or changes that are coming in, then it's also very slow to react to those changes as well. So I don't know. I don't think we could solve it on this podcast call, but
I think what we have to remember is that people generally are given of their time for the good of dancing.
Yes, absolutely.
And here's for me, it breaks down to this. I feel it's my job to promote Irish dancing, particularly as promoted by the Commission, but also Irish dancing for being Irish dancing, as opposed to promoting Irish dancers, if that makes sense. Because the dance goes on, if you know what I mean. So it's not about promoting my school or dancers from a particular region. It's about, so we try to, and we do really try very hard to do that, get different representation in the photographs, get people from, and that takes time to try and get people to turn up for a photo shoot from more than one region. And sometimes it's just convenient. Like if you're going to Dublin or Scotland, say, can we have 10 dancers, But you can't do that because you want to promote dancing. So you try and get little flavours. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, we did a St. Patrick's Day greeting from around the world. Yeah. And there was no cost. Well, the fun, we got some fantastic videos. People actually, because there was no costumes, there was no schools, it was just, here we are from Argentina, or here we are from Paris. And people took shots of themselves dancing on the beach in Australia and sent them in. So I like that idea, because we're restricted a lot from actually showing footage and photos, because of GDPR issues and because of child protection issues and because of rules and regulations. And that's hard, because you end up then showing all historical stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just you can't show the people what they might be interested in currently, because it could potentially have a conflict with a competition. And I think that's hard, because it's all over social media and it's everywhere except on the Commission site. Yes.
No, and so it looks like as an organisation we don't particularly care. Yes. So okay, this is a little sidetrack from that, but so I've talked to a few people about this, and I think that as the largest organisation, it could be one of our duties to almost control the narrative of, because we have a lot of negative reports from outsiders about Irish dance, the tan and the wigs and all of that, and nobody really gets to see what goes in, the huge amount of work that goes into creating Irish dancers and this, that, and the other. So, as I will ask you this, not as the public relations officer, I'll ask you as a teacher. Do you think we should be controlling the narrative and putting our own work out there?
I think we should try. And I think we have tried. I know Dervla Lennon, when she was in my role as PRO, she really did try. And because of her own background in media and television, she's a very glamorous girl. She was able, to argue the anti-makeup case actually very succinctly. But what's really interesting is that journalists in America, Scotland, Europe, they will actually ask about the dance. I find it's in Ireland specifically that it comes unstuck.
Oh, interesting.
Like we've had, really some lovely, lovely documentaries and newsreels and some really interesting stories. But the ones that cause the most stir are like when people go, they want to talk about the expense of the wigs and the sock glue,
Yeah.
And so they're, and I'm not saying that that's something I particularly support, but we have to understand that we've built up an entire industry around our Irish dancing.
No, I agree.
And it's not danced in a cottage anymore, and it's not danced on a barrel anymore. And the Sean-Nós dance has actually taken that over from us, and that's turned into an industry of dancing on barrels with brushes, So we have, we've probably gone very far down a particular road of bling, I would say. And I think that reflects fashions of the time. From working in a primary school, when you see what lengths parents will go to for communions and confirmations and Deb's dress.
Right.
And this is just an extension of that, if you know what I mean. And unless we can advise we met with fierce resistance when we banned makeup for children under 10. We had loads of letters of appeal saying, people just wanted to feel pretty and special. And we're saying, well, they can wait until they're 11. But even that, that took quite an effort to get it through our own organisation because it's a multicultural organisation. People are buying into it for a variety of reasons in different continents. And we have to be mindful that people are now signing up to the commission as teachers, and we have a certain responsibility to our teachers as well to protect their livelihoods. So it's all very well for me to laugh to say, that's it, no more wigs, no more sock glue. That really won't affect most of my kids because they don't care about it in the first place.
Right.
But in some areas, that could seriously affect the numbers in your class.
Right.
And there is where you have to be careful, because we now have people who are professional dance teachers.
Yes.
It's not like a school teacher teaching for 2 hours in the evening anymore. For me, it's almost a second job, but I'm conscious that I have another job. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
no, it does.
It's quite difficult to legislate when you're, and it's even difficult to compete because you're competing. A lot of people do dancing full time. And it is a full-time job. But when you're doing it as your second job and you realise it actually is a full-time job, if you know what I mean, it takes that many hours in the day up until the small hours of the morning. So it's a tricky one because, you have to respect that you're messing in some ways with other people's profession as well.
Right.
So for us, I think as an organisation, the important thing is that we keep the children's welfare central to it.
Absolutely.
We don't lose sight of our traditions, but we're not chained by our traditions either, because that's what makes the traditions be alive. The fact that they have potential for tomorrow as well as memories for yesterday. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes huge amount of sense. Absolutely. Which actually leads on quite nicely to your book, which I really wanted to talk about because, talk about history and our traditions. It's all in there. It's all in there. It's absolutely phenomenal. So just talk to me briefly about how it all came about.
This is really funny, but it came about as I really enjoy collaborative work, as I've said to you. I think some of my best work is done in collaboration with other people because I like teamwork. And there, if you get on well with people, there are people you can work very well with. So Mick McCabe is a very good friend of mine. We've been friends for a long time. We used to run the Blast Summer School together in the university.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a flute player, actually, from Manchester originally. And a random conversation, we were talking about, how the musicians and the dancers don't understand each other and how it's very separate now that you can, dancers think music comes from their iPod only and musicians don't understand that if they play too fast, the dancer won't be able to do their steps. So it started off as a general conversation, and then it was like, oh, wouldn't it be a great idea now if we could do a project on that and look for it, see if we can reconnect the musician and the dancers. So it's actually started off as innocently as that. And then it was like, there's nothing really done about the set dances at all. People know very little about them.
Yeah.
So it started off that it was going to be this little kind of pamphlet on the set dances. That was the original. So we said, sure, we'll apply for funding for it under the traditional arts scheme. So we applied, and plus I had done some of this work of some of the set dances in my PhD, but never published it. So we started to investigate the history of we just did the 40 current commission set dance tunes. There's a rationale for that being, obviously they're the ones that I know because I've played them at feshes for a long, long time. But also because it's a list that's contained, right. Because once you start to switch, you move, so we can say, okay, well, we know this is the book of CLRG set dances. And then if somebody wants to publish the Kogol set dances, some of them will be the same. And we can see that from the book. And if we want to publish the festival set dances, then that'll be different again. So we'll just make it a tangible collection. And I was really glad because it was only 40 set dances, but like that spanned like 4,000 years of Irish history and 4 years of our lives. So that was it. So originally it started just as a little information booklet, but then when we started to talk about it further, Mick is an illustrator. He's a graphic designer by trade, and it started to take on its own life because then he was going to do an illustration for each of the set dances that was connected to the history of the set dance. But of course we had to look for the history of the tunes first before we could do that. And at one point, like, it was taking so long, we were thinking maybe we'll just do the jigs. But I was against it because it wouldn't have been that whole cohesive project if we didn't include them all. And in the end, then we didn't even because originally it was almost like a study guide, for the TCRG. Let's put all the 6/8s together. Then let's put the 4/4s, and then let's put the 2/4s. But actually, it evolved into something quite different. Whereas we did put all that information in, but we allowed it to be a story because, I mean, as you know, Irish history is very much bound with orality and that whole notion of what was handed down. So we may have heard a story about St. Patrick's Day. It was an interesting one for St. Patrick's Day, actually, because the tune was played by marching bands on both sides in the American Civil War. I think that was it's fascinating because if you think about it, it's because of that's where the Irish went to. And when people went, they became part of the community that they were in.
Yeah.
So you had these little bits of Irishness appearing. And then the opposite side of that is you have tunes like the Sprig of Shillelagh, which are very, very orange in their orientation, which really we wouldn't have known until we looked for the tune. And I found that quite ironic because the Irish dance tradition, as you know, and the commission was set up with a very nationalistic focus of promoting an Irish canon of dance. And we've ended up in a collection of set dance tunes that has Morris tunes, that has orange tunes, that has tunes from the French Revolution, that has tunes that were pop songs in America and Swedish waltzes. So we were much more global than we originally thought. So to be honest, that whole project was really interesting. So it went from, should we write out the notes of the tune and we put a little bit of history into something that turned into a coffee table book. And I think the teachers, I have to say, I've been really not surprised, but delighted by the response. The teachers really want to know more about their set dances.
Absolutely.
And I was really heartened by that because, sometimes we get so bogged down just in living from competition to competition. We don't have time to follow our natural curiosity. And we did here. Like, I've had a really good response from people saying, oh my God, I'm going to get one for my studio. I'm going to get one for my niece for Christmas. I'm going to tell my dancers about this. So we now have a trad dance, www.trad.dance online shop because we've been really busy actually.
Good.
Came out. So that's really good because, as I say, we're only still selling it like in our spare time at the weekends, and there's not a lot of spare time, as you know, if you're a dance teacher who also has a full-time job. So it's like you're going around in the boot of the car like the old days, So Mick said, oh no, I'll sell them online. So I said, okay, that's good. You can sell them online and I'll put them in the boot of my car and we'll do it the old-fashioned way and the digital way. But what's nice about that is we've had a chance to for me to go back and play the set dances just as beautiful tunes and to look at some of the people who used to dance the settings. So look at the settings John Culnan would have done of the Downfall of Paris, for example, dancing the third and fourth part. And, one of the things this has really made me think about is to honour the work that John has done before it was so, I suppose, popular to write about Irish dance.
Yeah.
And he, all that material that he collected, which I have to say he shared very generously with me. After doing a book that just dealt with 40 tunes, I was like, oh my God, how did he come out? How did he publish 10 books? Right. Because it literally consumes you. Like there were people who I haven't spoken to in a year because I literally didn't have a minute, because when I wasn't at work, I was either up at 6 in the morning or up until 2 in the morning trying to finish off a text on something.
But you must be very proud, Orla. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, well, thank you. I can't take any credit now for the aesthetics of it, except to say that we did have a shared vision for it. But I have to say I'm very fond of the illustrations, because I think they bring the set dances to life in a particular way. And I think we have found a way to make a collection of music and dance history accessible to a global population. I hope, anyway.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. No, I'm saying it's gorgeous because it's visually it's gorgeous, but just the writing, everything about it, and just the fact that, I'm proud to hold it as an Irish dancer. You know?
And do you find that you look at the set dances that you danced yourself?
Yes, of course. Yeah. But my teacher came from, her mother was a feis musician. And so she always instilled in me that it was the music that came first. And so, so every time I did a set dance, as she was choreographing it had to tell a story. And I would say that's the way. You see, because I'm a musician as well, I would say that's really where that came from. And I suppose we were just lucky that we had the skills to deliver that, But I have to say it did take a lot more time than we had thought. But I think if you're going to do something, you want to do it well. Yes, and you've done it very, very well. Very well. So I'll put the where people can buy the book.
That would be super. Thank you.
I'll put that in the show notes. But yeah, I can't encourage people enough to buy it, because it's all about our the history. 4,000 years of Irish history told through 40 traditional set dances. So, if you want to know anything about where Irish dance came from, especially for the dancers that don't have any Irish heritage.
Absolutely, and they wouldn't have any way of knowing that history. And for me, it was interesting, to have, say, Francis Wardis, who, as you know, teaches with me, and Michael Fitzpatrick, composers in the same book as Carolyn and Conlon.
Yes, I know.
We spanned back from Turlough Carolyn to modern day composers, and I think that's very exciting. And I think that shows that we have changed a little bit too.
Oh,
we just have maybe taken note of all and even looking at the competitions that were brought in the Wandering Musician, and that brought in the Vanishing Lake and the Char Lady, and I have to say we did have a lot of fun doing the stories. We did. And we had maybe 6 possible stories for each one. That's really the Irishness of it, and my whole family, I'd say, never ever wants to see a Jig or a Jacobite again, because they were all getting sent drafts. What do you think? But so it does. It takes a village to rear a child, and it takes 2 families and all of your friends to write a book.
Oh, but it's brilliant though, Orla. It's absolutely brilliant. But your name's on it, so there you go.
That's it. And so now I can call myself an author. Yes. And that's exciting too, because it's as I say, it's not something that came easily, But I do feel it's important, because my area of expertise is in Irish music and dance. It's important to have publications that reflect that, and I'm excited by that, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
and grateful for getting to work with Mick on it, because he was very committed to the project, even though it related more maybe to my professional life, if you know what I mean.
Yes, no, absolutely. But the mission of the book, right, or when it started as the pamphlet, was to bridge the gap between the musicians and the dancers again. I just think that the more we can do of that, the better, because it is 2 very different worlds. But
at the same time, we do need to understand some of the other words, and it's funny because, I suppose each generation thinks that they're the first generation to come up against those kind of tensions,
Right.
And it's always happened, but it's just good to put down a marker that we at least have respect for each other's talent, and to try and look back at the likes of Willie Clancy and look at Michael Flatley and know that they were musicians and dancers.
Yes, yes, exactly.
It has to be one or the other.
Right.
And what I would love to do, but again, we're restricted by it, is to get people, to put settings of the dances, even older settings, of their dances, on a DVD with it. But it's just right now we have so many rules and regulations that's just not possible, because of fresh material, even with the trad sets. And that is my hope, really, is that we'll find a way to share that dance knowledge, on a better footing, really, because people can do, professional sports people can do it. They can have coaching videos, other art forms can do it, like different orchestras can all play a Bach piece. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just feel that sometimes we're doing a lot of really beautiful material, and we've got some gorgeous music and dance, and we're not actually showcasing it ourselves. That would be something I would really like to do. Like, say, with Greensboro this year, it was really interesting because we're going to a place where they don't know Irish dance that much. So there's a huge opportunity to actually showcase it there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to think about coming back for the 50th Worlds to Dublin, like hopefully at that point we will be able to show some of the highlights of what has happened in 50 years and how it has evolved. Because we've done quite a lot of things, and they're not all related to wigs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know.
Stand up and let the dance be central, and that would be my wish for it. And that's one of the reasons, like, I sometimes think when I'm driving to a meeting in Dublin or Cork, why am I doing this at 1 o'clock in the morning? And I go, you're doing this because you want to make sure, and that's why everyone else is doing it as well. People are flying in from Australia, like I'm only going down along the M7. They're flying from Australia for 3 days because they believe that they can make a contribution, and that's got to be good. So, the will is there. We just have to find the way to do it with more efficacy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I just think, I think you're right. There's like it's not even a movement, but it's just there needs to be a movement about it, because we're all passionate about it. We all want this art form to last way into the future, so I think it's vital that we start having a bit more collaboration, a bit more showcasing, and some documentation. I mean, if we're not documenting what we're doing, what will the future know? And
I think there is a little more documentation happening now, because I mean, we have a national dance archive set up in UL, but we're trying to encourage traditional dancers, actually, because we have way more contributions from other dance forms. So it's a culture change, because we've always been taught not to film. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we want to get people to think about documenting their practice and leaving it there, because as dance is ephemeral by its nature, and it's gone tomorrow, and it'll only be there tomorrow if we record it in such a way that it can be preserved.
Yeah.
I have to think of my poor old great grandfather O'Rourke with his no sons. You have to make sure there's something well worth handing on to the next generation, because that has to be the best generation. You have to believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. So can talk about the archive then, if you can.
We're set up in partnership with the University of Limerick and the Dance Research Forum Ireland, so that was founded by Dr. Catherine Foley, actually, in association with a bunch of us that were on the board, and with assistance of funding from the Arts Council. So the Arts Council, again, there is funding out there, but it's really time consuming to get it. So there was an archivist set in place, and the good thing is that the collection is housed at the university, which means that it'll always be looked after. Yeah. And it will be catalogued, and it'll be properly maintained. That means that it can take longer for some of the stuff to actually, be visible on it, because it has to go through a whole process, because there, is an archivist who works on it. But I think that there's a lot of stuff, and I know this is something we have been discussing at the Commission, that there are recordings, that we do have some stuff even from the television recordings, that we should be foregrounding. There's a lovely one of Sean Fagan doing the two-hand, there's a lovely one of Colleen Hession and Donna Cohn-Weenacone.
I know, I love that,
clips of Grania Feely. There are really, really nice video clips out there. It's just that, you have a new generation who put up every single thing that they eat on Instagram.
Right.
And then you have us with all of these rules who should be promoting dance, but we can't. So we have to find some way of addressing that balance while not contravening, obviously, within the law, because that whole social media issue is a big thing. So we have to be prudent. And I totally understand that. Like, we have moral responsibilities. But So that's why we're safe enough at the moment with stuff that's in the public domain, so we can put that out there. But we have to be careful with people's personal profile. So we did do video shoots. Barb Blakely and myself, we've gathered some stuff. We've been very lucky when World was in Scotland. We got really a lot of assistance from the marketing bureau and stuff like that. So we have stock photos and things that we can use that have kids from a couple of different countries that are not focusing on a school, So there's all of those considerations as well. So eventually, we will get there. There is a willingness to do it though. And we want to promote dance, but as part of the culture, but as part of tomorrow's world as well as yesterday's.
Yeah, I think that's hugely important. Part of tomorrow's world. I think you're absolutely right. Oh, well, I mean, just some great... yes, you're right. It's all volunteers' time at the moment. So perhaps we need to start paying some people. But who knows? that might get sticky.
Professional Irish dancer, yeah. Well, we now have people who are professional Irish dancers, and that's good.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that talking professional Irish dancers, how do you feel about the professional industry of Irish dance? Where do you think it's going, or where do you think it could go?
Well, I think no matter how we frame it, we can't doubt that river dance changed life for all of us forever, really.
Right.
And I mean, and to be fair, I mean, and I know Jean and Colin took a lot of the public sort of pressure, if you like, for that. But they were very instrumental in a changing shift of who could experience Irish dance. Yeah. And it opened up the spin-off afterwards, the spin-off with the Lord of the Dance, the Feet of Flames, the Heartland, even Heartbeat of Homes. It's fantastic for me to see that we have kids coming to college who can go out and tour and make, a good living. That's really good.
Yeah,
it's important that they can do that. The thing is, though, we also have to train them how to cope with the show being over. And this comes back to the continuing professional development, which I feel really strongly about, because no matter what, when you teach in a school, like, you're responsible for all the kids in your school until they're not in your school anymore, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But so you kind of try to look after them. But I feel sometimes like we send them off in these shows and then they succeed. But when they come out of the shows, what do they do then? And I feel we have, especially for some of our younger dancers that we send off, I do think we should have some sort of, some kind of CPD, some kind of training. Yeah. And even for ourselves, to retrain, to refresh, so that we can constantly learn together as a community. I think that would greatly strengthen the community, to be honest.
I 100% agree. Within the ballet world, they have They have a fund that helps counsel and transition dancers from the professional world back into into other aspects and other industries and that kind of thing. And yes, I think that would be very beneficial.
I mean, I've just done some work with Roisin. I know you spoke to Roisin as well, where we did some research with Irish dancers, ballet dancers and contemporary dancers, and again, we just expect the Irish dancers to push through
yeah
push through what, where. So I think generally we need to expand our culture of care. I think we are trying, but I think we can do more. I do think we are, because we're training them and we're revving them up, but we have to give them some structures to, as you say, like reintegrate, find another way to express their dance, post competition and now post show.
Yes, and just there are opportunities out there for any dancer, and just the academic side of things, even it's just
the thing. Like, sometimes people don't realize that it's for them, that they can do. We have a lovely master's in dance studies, and we have the ethnochoreology, which is the world one. We have the performance one, and they're quite different. They attract a different strand of people, and it's really exciting for the people. And I know this because I've done it. For the people who do engage it at the university level, it can be really life changing.
Yeah,
because they do it for a different reason. It's not just the piece of paper,
Yeah,
it's all people that you encounter along the way, and that's very exciting, I think.
It is, and then that builds a whole generation or a whole community of people who are, challenging or trying new things and just branching out. It can only benefit our community.
Well, we'll do our best, Martin, to keep it ticking over.
Well, I love it. I love all the work you're doing, Orla. I mean, you are doing a lot of work. So I really do appreciate all of that. And you're a superstar. We have one more final... I don't know if you've listened to the podcast, but we have our rapid fire section. So answer as you see fit. So this is Orla in a nutshell. Okay, what is your favourite food?
Bacon and cabbage.
Ah, good girl. River dance or Lord of the Dance?
River dance.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Everyone is entitled to make their own mistakes.
Ah, I love it. Absolutely love it. Right, I know that this might be a tough one for you, but what's a book that has changed your life? I'm sure there's hundreds of them.
Ooh. I would say it is probably The Green Platform. It's The Green Platform. It's how you can view life from the green platform or the red platform, and it's how we respond to the things that happen that change our life. By Declan. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I'll have to check it out.
It's a really, really good book.
Yeah. It sounds fascinating. Okay, this is the hot topic. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No.
Oh, never mind.
I'm a pepperoni person.
So, if you could just give us an example of, as a dancer or as a teacher, some successes that you've had, and then contrast that with some challenges.
Ooh, okay. Well, as a dancer, one of my great memories is when we won the dance drama in the Savoy in Limerick. We did a reconstruction of 1916, and I remember being in the dance drama, and we had painted a backdrop of the GPO. So that's why I was there.
Yeah.
We went on a lot of trips abroad. Like before there were any shows, we used to travel to France and Germany and Spain and different countries. We had a lot of fun doing that. As a teacher, I've been very lucky. I've been associated in our own school with 4 different world champions. I wouldn't say was responsible for them because it's a village to rear a child, but I've been very lucky. I mean, Michael, Don and Anthony Sharkey, Zoe Griffin, Ronan O'Brien, they were all fantastic students, and 3 out of the 4 of them came out of our very small catchment area in County Clare. But my mother gave that her whole life, because after she got married, women weren't supposed to work. So she started teaching dancing. So that, things changed like that. So I've been lucky in that way. I suppose in terms, so those have been some of the success stories that I would say, though I've had other things that I would consider a success, as when I had one particular child, and I don't want to name them, but it was a big challenge for this person to dance at the World, and they got a world medal. And in some ways, the level of work required for that to happen was, that was a fantastic achievement for so many reasons, because for so many reasons that person might never have been able to compete or learn dancing. So sometimes it's those little gains that make you keep going, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Keep you ticking over it. I mean, I've had quite a lot of challenges in it. In that we've had, when my mother came back from Australia, she went to Australia to give workshops with Harry McCaffrey, and they both had they were too long in the air, basically, and they both suffered from thrombosis. And Harry McCaffrey actually died. My mother was out of action for quite a long time, so I ended up teaching a class. I've been teaching since I was 14. I used to get the bus out to Ennis in my uniform to keep the class going, because, at the time they weren't sure whether Mam would be able to teach or keep going. So I suppose I always had this notion of the show must go on, the show must go on. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yes,
so that was a big part of it. And that is the challenge, really, because when you invest so much in it, you want to hold on to a little piece of the concentrate for yourself, but it's hard because you can't help getting involved in people's lives.
Yeah.
So they become a part of your life, and sometimes it works. And what's hard is when it doesn't work. And that's really hard, because everybody tries very hard, but sometimes children have different needs and you're not it. Yeah. That's hard. I find that hard because it's a very public rejection.
Yes.
But you have to understand that people have to do what's best for their children. And that if you're not it, then that's just it. You're just not. And I do find that, because when you're very committed to your teaching, you want to do the best that you can. But sometimes you just have to acknowledge that actually, this is a relationship that's actually not working.
Right.
And that's a big challenge, because, we all want things to be great all the time. And sometimes you learn more maybe from the things that don't work out than from the things that do.
Yeah.
Because it's the little things. It's when somebody wins the prelim and you get a lovely text saying it was the best day of her life.
Oh, yeah.
So you're kind of going, wow, I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't up for 10 hours worrying about that. Cause, do you know what I mean?
Right.
So sometimes it's like it's karma. You get it back, but in a completely different way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
And I have to say, as I say, I've been really fortunate to taste success, and I do find the moving on when people move to a different school or stop. I do find that hard, but it's a bit like that's part of life, the coming and going of it. Yeah. That's part of life. And one thing I will say is that the dancing community, for all our faults, and I'm saying our there, really do look after each other when it comes to the crunch. So at times of crisis, there is a fantastic generosity.
Yes.
And people tend to look out for each other. And I think that's when you realise that you are actually part of something, that's actually very good, fundamentally, even though we all have our moments. And I think you have to hold on to that, because that's the reason why you do it. You don't do it because of all the other reasons that people, oh, so-and-so didn't give it to me today. And, you have to learn to lose as well as win. That's part of it. I've tasted fantastic success. Also, terrible disappointments. And I think that's one of the hard parts as well, when you have somebody who works really hard and just never gets their lucky day.
Yeah,
and that's, it is largely built in with luck. Nobody's entitled. Everybody's children work hard. And as somebody who's taught a long time, I feel quite strongly about that. We all get, when we lose our perspective, when we get emotionally involved, we can kind of lose the run of ourselves a little bit. But we have to realise that everybody up there has made sacrifices, that we know nothing about. So it has taught me a lot about life, I have to say. Yeah. And I've kind of gotten hooked on it, even though I only fell into it by accident.
That's brilliant. So do you have, as an adjudicator and teacher, do you have a pet peeve, that something that dancers do that really grates on your nerves?
If they're out of time, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
I can't. I just can't. And I'm terrible. I might really love somebody, then come out in the session, they'll be all out of time, and I'll just go tank. Yeah. And I feel really bad about it, but it really offends me, because I'm listening for that lovely beat and that connection with the music, and it doesn't happen.
Well, yeah, that's the point. It's a connection to the music. Yeah, absolutely. So, and in closing then, if you had some advice to give to young dancers, what would it be? Sage words from somebody who's survived this long. Yes, exactly.
I would say, if in the context of Irish dance, you've got to dance because you love it, and you have to love dancing more than you love winning, because nobody ever can take away your love of dance, even though the result might go against you.
Yes.
So you have to dance from your heart. Listen to what you're told, and you have to also trust your teacher, because your teacher wants the best for you. I really do believe that. But when you stop loving it, then it really is
game over. Yeah. Well, brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Orla. This has been absolutely fantastic. And what was the website's traddance.com?
www.trad.dance. Yeah.
Oh, trad.dance. Okay. Okay, so for all the listeners, so they can get your book, Jigs to Jacobites.
They can look me up on the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance, or they can look me up at Scully Rourke or at Dance Ireland, and if they find me, they'll be very lucky.
You're all over the place. I love it. That's it. Well, brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Orla. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Martin. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, you take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Irish Dance Podcast. Please follow us on Facebook at the Irish Dance Podcast, or on Instagram at the Irish Dance Podcast. Thanks and have a great day. Bye-bye.